What's up everyone, Darcblade here with a Hunter's Guide to Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. In this video, we're going to be showing off some full set budget builds for the bow. Now, what is a full set budget build? Well, it's a complete armor set from one specific monster that has skills on it that complement the playstyle of the weapon we're covering. Add on some decorations and you'll have a strong build that is quite quick to make and should take you through the game, through the story of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, so you can start farming endgame as quickly as possible. These videos will feature 2 builds which should allow you to take on most of the quests all the way up to anomaly quests, to which by then you're probably going to start experimenting with mixed sets. So let's jump into this. Now before we get into the video, a reminder that if you enjoy these builds, consider leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, as we make builds for a variety of games that cater to a variety of playstyles. Now when it comes to the bow, it's a very damage focused weapon, but it does have a downside of being quite fragile. So most of the time when it comes to your defense, it's all about keeping your distance or utilizing the dodge bolt to successfully counter monster attacks. And the first full set budget build we'll be showing off is the budget spread build. This build is a close range bow build and utilizes spread arrows above all the other arrow types. This means that we do put ourselves at risk by getting up close to a monster, but when using the dodge bolt, you can use it to pretty much counter every single monster attack, negating damage against you so long as you're on point with your timing. Also, as we're up close and using spread arrows, it means we will be doing a lot of close range damage to monsters. So for this build you'll need the full Rachna Kadaki armor set, which includes the Rachna Helm X, Rachna Mail X, Rachna Arm Guards X, Rachna Coil X, and the Rachna Greaves X. For your petalace, this is down to personal preference, however I normally recommend the absolute petalace to give us more health, but like I said, it's down to personal preference. And then when it comes to your talismans, unfortunately talismans are still a little bit of a point of contention in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. No one's going to have the absolute same talismans. What I will recommend is if you can get a talisman with at least level 2 weakness exploit on it, or decoration slots that will allow for that, you'll be good to go. And then finally for the weapon, I'm using the Summit's Glory Glow, which is the Blood Orange Bishaten bow. Now, why am I using this bow? Well, it's one of the rare bows that doesn't actually need a Mighty Bow Jewel to gain access to all of its charge levels. It means we can also forego using the Mighty Bow Feather on this build. As for the Rampage skill, this is down to personal preference and what you have available to you. For this demonstration, I'll be showing off a Wyvern exploit. Now when it comes to the decorations, you've got a fair few to play around with, and as this is a budget build, we are not using any of the major decorations that are only acquired from doing anomaly monsters. So, first of all, I've gone for KO Jewels to max out Slugger. This is an optional jewel, you can replace this if you so wish. I've then gone for Critical Jewels to max out Crit Boost, Steadfast Jewels to max out Stun Resistance. This again is optional, so you can replace it if you wish. Then gone for a Thrift Jewel to max out Spare Shot, Tenderizer Jaws to max out Weakness Exploit, a Brace Jaw for point in flinch free, definitely useful when it comes to playing with groups, and then a Sated Jaw for a point in free meal. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a raw attack of 370. Mind you, this will be lower if you're going through the game for the first time, as we are using the Blood Orange Bishaten bow at its absolute highest level. You'll also have a blast attack of 16 with 0% affinity, although this can be at least 50% when we take into account weakness exploit, and you'll have a strong defense of 701. That is exceedingly strong against fire, strong against dragon, but unfortunately weak to the other elements, especially ice. As for the switch skills, I will say these are down to personal preference, but I will say that dodge bolt is kind of essential when using spread arrows, as it allows you to counter monster attacks as will be up close and at risk at times. Now when it comes to the skills, a lot of these skills are built into the armor, which makes it so useful for the bow, especially spread bows. First of all, you have Constitution at level 5, reducing the stamina cost of moves that consume stamina, so pretty much all of the bow attacks. This also means that we don't necessarily have to worry about using dash juice on a hunt as well, saving our materials. You also have Critical Boost at level 3, increasing the raw damage of our attacks when they crit a monster. You'll have Weakness Exploit at level 3, increasing our affinity whenever we're attacking monster weak points, up to a potential 50%. You'll then have Spare Shot at level 3. Spare Shot is a skill that gives us a percentage chance of not consuming an arrow coating whenever we fire the bow. You'll then have Stamina Surge at level 3, allowing us to recover our stamina more quickly. You'll then have Slugger at level 3. This is a byproduct of the decorations as well as the charm I'm using, but it does increase our stun potential, especially if we use an absolute power shot, so we can knock out monsters a little bit more easily. You'll then have Spread Up at level 3, greatly increasing the raw power of our spread arrows. You'll then have reload speed at level 3. To be honest, with the bow you only really need this at level 2, as it allows you to load bow coatings automatically when you select them. You'll then have stun resistance at level 3. This is an optional quality of life skill, but is useful as it prevents any stun effects on our hunters, which is handy when it comes to learning new monster attacks. You'll then have Tune Up at level 1, which is unfortunately wasted on the bow. This is a bow gun related skill. And then finally you'll have Free Meal at level 1, giving us a small chance of not consuming a potion or other consumable when we use it, which is handy when it comes to conserving our supplies when we're going through the game. And then finally you'll have Flinch Free at level 1, which prevents minor knockbacks from monsters and more importantly our allies. As we're in close proximity to monsters, when playing with friends, this comes in very useful. So there we have it, that is the budget spread build that I would recommend. But every build out there has various pros and cons, no build is absolutely perfect. And remember, this is a budget build as well, so it's not going to have all the best skills, all the best DPS skills, all the best survival skills. But nonetheless, it still has pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its damage output, especially when you're up close to a monster. Having skills like critical boost, weakness exploit, and especially spread up, it means you're able to dish out large amounts of damage, especially if you're targeting monster weak points. On top of that, this build has excellent stamina related skills. Constitution and especially Stamina Surge means that we don't always have to use dash juice, saving our consumables for when we start using mix sets. And then finally for the pros is that this build does not need the Mighty Bow Duel and the Bow Charge Plus skill. But of course there are cons. One of the biggest cons for this build is, unfortunately, you have to be close to a monster, and with the bow that can be risky. So you have to rely on Dodge Bolt to actually avoid monster attacks and counter them. And the other con is, unfortunately, it does lack a little bit when it comes to survival skills. Whilst it does have stun resistance, which could be seen as a quality of life or survival skill, you are really relying on Dodge Bolt or keeping your distance for the best results. Nonetheless, this build is absolutely fantastic for a full set budget build with the bow, and it's the one I used for the majority of the game once I replaced my pre-Sunbreak build. But of course, there's more than one budget build out there. The second full set budget build I refer to as the full Bloodlust build. Now, as this is a Bloodlust build, it means we're going to be farming Shigaru Magala quite a bit. But it will give us an incredibly strong DPS build that has a unique playstyle, making things a little bit more interesting in my opinion. So for this build you'll need the full Arc set, which includes the Arc Helm, Arc Mail, Arc Van Braces, Arc Coil and the Arc Greaves. For my Petalace, I'm using the Absolute Petalace, although this is down to personal preference as always. And then for your Talisman, once again, I'd recommend using a Talisman that has at least Weakness Exploit level 2 on it and a tier 2 decoration slot. And as for my weapon, I'm using Alert Innocence, which is the Shigaru Magala bow. The reason we're using this is, once again, it's one of the rare bows that doesn't need the Mighty Bow Duel and the Bow Charge Plus skill to have access to all levels of its arrows. As for the Rampage skill on this, unfortunately we only have a small Rampage decoration slot, so I've gone for a Spirit Bird doubled Rampage skill, although to be honest this is down to personal preference. So when it comes to the decorations, you got a few to play around with, so I've gone for Physique Jaws to put some points into Constitution. I've then gone for Critical Jaws to max out Crit Boost, Tenderizer Jaw to max out Weakness Exploit, and then you'll have a tier 1 jaw socket to play around with of your preference. I've gone for a Brace Jaw, as once again we'll be up close as we're using spread arrows. You can use, of course, something else if you so desire. So if you've done what I've done here, you have a raw attack of at least 360. This can go up to almost 400 when you take into account the skills we have. So the raw attack of this build severely fluctuates. You also have 40% base affinity, which can easily be 100% when we take into account both weakness exploit, and you'll have a strong defense of 751 that is strong against water and ice, but unfortunately weak to the other elements, especially dragon. When it comes to the switch skills, as always, these are down to personal preference. As for the skills, you have Resentment at level 3. Resentment is a skill that kicks in whenever we have an abnormal status on our hunter, and this build is littered with them. So Resuscitate should be active for a majority of the hunt, increasing our raw attack. You'll then have Critical Boost at level 3, increasing the damage of our critical hits, but this only applies to the raw portion of an attack, not the elemental portion. You'll then have Weakness Exploit at level 3, increasing our affinity whenever we're attacking monster weak points. You'll then have Critical Element at level 3, increasing the elemental damage whenever our hits crit a monster. Think of it like Crit Boost, but for the elemental portion of an attack. You'll then have Razor Sharp at level 3, which prevents your weapon from losing sharpness. Very useful on the bow. Unfortunately, this is built into the gear, so we cannot get rid of it on this build. But we'll also have Spare Shot at level 3, giving us a chance of not consuming a coating when we fire them with the bow. You'll then have Constitution at level 3, reducing the stamina depletion when we're firing our arrows, as well as doing over certain actions like dodging, evading and such. You'll then have Coalescence level 3. Coalescence is a skill that whenever we remove a negative, blight or abnormal status from our hunter, it enhances both our elemental and our raw attack. It also increases how quickly status ailments will build up, which is useful for our coatings. Next up we have Bloodlust at level 3, which is the whole central point of this build. Now Bloodlust at level 3 will inflict our hunters with a modified version of the Frenzy virus. So when we start fighting a monster, you'll notice that the Frenzy bar above your health bar, the little purple bar, start to fill up. This means our health will drain, leaving red health on our health bar. This won't kill us though, but whilst this is active, it increases our raw attack, increases our evasion capabilities, and reduces the stamina cost of actions that consume stamina, which is very handy for the bow. But there are two possible outcomes when it comes to the Frenzy virus. Should you let the purple bar fill up, then the full Frenzy virus will kick in, robbing you of your natural ability to heal and making you take more damage from monster attacks. So you don't want this to happen. You can control this either by taking null berries to reduce it slightly, or should you continue to hit a monster with your attacks, you can overcome the frenzy, and in doing so, you will get a massive boost to your base affinity, and you won't have the negative effects of the frenzy virus. You get a massive 25% base affinity added to your build. But it does take away the other aspects of the frenzy virus, so the increased raw attack, evasion, and stamina use reduction. Additionally, once you overcome the Bloodlust, the red health that it left on your health bar will be fully healed. But you have to remember that Bloodlust, Resuscitate, and Coalescence all work well in unison with one another. They synergize well, making this build very potent. And then finally for the skills, you have two more, which are pretty much optional skills depending on your talismans, which are Slugger, increasing our knockout capabilities, and Flinch Free, reducing minor knockbacks from monsters and especially our allies. So there we have it, that's the budget arc build that I would recommend. It is a very quirky way to play, to be fair, and I may be biased a bit because the Magalas are my favourite monsters in the game, and using their full set is definitely something I enjoy. I like the concept of the Frenzy virus, and ultimately how it works. But every build out there has pros and cons, even this one. One of its biggest pros is its damage output. From Crit Boost, Weakness Exploit, Critical Element, Coalescence, Resuscitate and Bloodlust, we should be able to deal a large amount of damage with this budget build. On top of that, all the skills in this build synergize really well, Bloodlust being the key to activating certain other skills like Resuscitate and Coalescence. And the final pro for this build is it does have some quality of life options. From Constitution, Spare Shot and the bonuses you get from Bloodlust, they all add to the quality of the hunt, maybe making it feel a little bit easier than it is. But alas, there are cons, two big ones. One of the biggest cons for this build is the Bloodlust health drain, which, if you take a hit whilst you have a large portion of red health, it could lead to a card. And the other con is, unfortunately, we don't have any stamina surge, and the stamina bonuses we get from Bloodlust are only active when the actual frenzy virus is building up, meaning that there will be times where stamina can be an issue. This, of course, is complemented and countered slightly through outside methods such as dash juice or utilising the focus shot switch skill. But regardless, for me this is an exceedingly fun budget build to use, and for me was the next step up after the Raknakadaki spread budget build, which allowed me to take on the last monsters in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, as well as the early anomaly quests. Now, before I go, one thing I should add with the bows is you don't have to use the ones I suggested here. There are alternatives, especially if you dislike spread arrows. The normal Bishaten bow is an example of a bow that doesn't actually need the bow charge plus skill, as well as the Harbinger's battle bow. The showroom model, which is the Shogun Senator bow, is also a good example of another bow that doesn't need the bow charge plus skill, as well as the Diablos bow. So there are options out there for those of you who dislike using spread arrows. But there we have it, those are two full set budget builds that I recommend for progressing through the story of Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak for the bow. Hopefully bow users out there will find them useful. So until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you full set budget builds for the bow in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.